Hello, friends. Welcome to the Great Things LLC podcast with your host, me, Josh Meter. All right, welcome back. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about the new field or emerging field of Astro-Coaching, astrology combined with life coaching. I am really pleased to welcome my friend Heidi Bortel of Zing Astrology to the show. So we're going to jump into this. Welcome, Heidi.
Hi, Josh. Good to see you.
Yeah, I'm glad to meet you on this quarantine, beautiful afternoon outside.
Yes.
So in preparation for the show, I wanted to make sure I had my facts straight. So I went to the dictionary, the source of all knowledge behind Google, to see what the definition of astrology says in the text. And that definition says astrology is the study of the movements and relative position of celestial bodies, interpreted as having an influence on human affairs and the natural world. So that's the scholastic difference, but tell us about your view and your perspective on astrology.
Of course. Well, I'll start by saying I was always fascinated with the sky and the stars and the planets from a little girl, as most of us are as kids. And that fascination continued. And when I was about 12 years old, my aunt showed me an astrology book. And I was just blown away that the planets could have meanings and energy and that they could be influencing us. And it was a love affair that started right away. So since I was a preteen, I've been gobbling up astrology books and really just observing people and places and things and events. And because of my fascination with psychology and just what makes people tick, it just really was just another thing that I really enjoyed to try to figure out myself and also other people that I liked, people that I loved, celebrities, whoever it was just another chance like, oh, what are they all about? And so it's like this mystery that constantly unfolds. And I'm sure any astrologer would tell you that you never stop learning. And there's very few things that hold my attention for a long time. But this has, because there's always another layer. There's always more to learn. That is the wonderful thing, but it's also the shadow in a way of astrology, because it can be overwhelming to a beginner because there are so many layers and so many, you can go so in depth that sometimes it gets overwhelming. So, but it's something that holds my attention and my passion and probably always will. Yeah.
Well, for a lot of people, astrology, their exposure to it probably is limited to the Sunday afternoon paper with the 3 lines of predicting their future,
right,
which always is just such a funny view on it. Let's go. Could you just share a little bit more about like the astrology? It has roots in our history, in our ancient cultures, the natural events. So just maybe touch a little bit on that.
Sure. I think what's important to remember is that all of us, probably almost all of us, are a little bit of an amateur astrologist, just because we have for thousands of years watched the sun, watched the moon. We know, you'll hear that, when it's a full moon that everybody's going crazy, or the hospitals are packed, or everybody's moody, or I can't sleep. And there's the Farmer's Almanac, right? We've planted by the phases of the moon for thousands of years. And I think it's because the moon is so visible to us and it lights up our world at night like the sun during the day, right? And so we know when it's not there, when it's a new moon and it's dark, and it's a visual for us. And I think that's why a lot of times we don't think of, like, the general person doesn't think, well, why would Jupiter have anything to do with it? Because we can't see him usually. Sometimes as a star, with our naked eye. But I think because if we had Jupiter hanging in the sky doing this, new moon phase or a full Jupiter, then all of a sudden that would be part of our day to day because it'd be so visual to us. But just that said, it's all of those planets and stars have an energy that relates to us, the tides, the planting seasons, even reproduction. So we're all tied to that energy in some way. And so when we take into consideration, like you were talking about, the horoscopes in the paper, all they're looking at in those horoscopes are where your sun is positioned when you were born. And so that's wonderful. It can give a very general overview. But that's why a lot of skeptics are like, wait a minute. I know not every Scorpio on the planet's having the same kind of day. That's not realistic, right? So when you look at the natal chart and all of a sudden like, oh, wait, the moon is important, where it's placed when you were born, where Venus was placed, where Mars was placed. So to get a true horoscope, having it done by your exact natal chart, then you can really get some insight as to you as an individual and what you're going through, rather than every Scorpio on the planet.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the natal chart, because it's not real familiar to a lot of people. And I'll throw up a graphic on the screen here so we can get an example of what one looks like. And when you look at it, it's not just a little, hey, you're going to run into some money. There's angles and science and apexes. Yeah, right. So let's talk a little bit like what is natal chart? How do you find it? And does it move? Does it stay fixed through your life?
So the best place to find your natal chart is astro.com, in my opinion, because it's a free service and it's very detailed and run by very conscientious astrologers. And you can get a lot of different types of natal charts drawn automatically and very easily on that site. But what a natal chart is you can get a 3D natal chart, but typically the natal chart is on it's a flat circle and it has 12 sections, and those are our houses. And the planets all fall in different spots according to the minute you were born. And that's why time is so important, because every planet moves at a different rate or rotation. And so, for instance, say the moon, it takes about every 2 days to go into a sign. So if you're off by 2 days, well, you're probably gonna have a different moon. And then we have things like the rising sign that change every 2 hours. So that's why someone born on the same day as you could have a completely different chart because of the passage of time. And so the natal chart is how it is the day you were born, but then there's the progressed charts, which things shift as you age and throughout your lifespan. The beautiful thing about a natal chart is it's kind of a starting point. And on astro.com and any other service, it can tell you where are your static placements of your planets, when you were born, but then it shows what are the planets doing right now? And how are they interacting with where your natal positions are? And so that's where we get the things like conjunctions and trines and oppositions. It's just how they're playing together, these planets in your chart and the transits happening around them.
I attended one of your workshops, your informational workshops, which was excellent. And it was how to read a natal chart. And I feel like I got through the first page of a 10,000 page encyclopedia. There's a lot behind it. But what I really found enjoyable was the aspects of energetics and almost archetypes, like planets and energies. They have certain archetypes. So when you see something that's conjunct or opposed, you use those archetypes or those descriptions or concepts of them to see how they interplay.
Yeah, I love archetypes. And I think it's also because I had a fascination in my youth around mythology, Greek mythology and Roman mythology. And there's so much tied into that. Each planet is a ruler of a house, and each sign is ruled by a planet, and they have their archetypes. So there's all of these archetypes to discover that are really, really interesting and kind of and they are mythological. And, for instance, like Pluto, is a planet of transformation and death, and is represented kind of like by the underworld. And you think of the River Thames and, just all of those things that are just so kind of juicy mythological information. And the fact that we have like Venus, our planet of love, that's our love placement in our chart, is ruled by, that's Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty. And so there's all of these tie-ins to ancient archetypes that were true then and still are true today, which is kind of a beautiful thing, and how that works out in your chart too.
Mm-hmm. And with the archetypes, as far as people understanding, I think everyone has just a natural understanding of archetypes or of those feel of it. So it's not so foreign, and you don't have to be an expert in Greek mythology because you know what an underworld may feel like, or love, or war, or death. So it's really good. Yeah. Now, taking that, so there is some ancient knowledge, there is some true astrophysics on where things are moving and timing, and then there's the psychology. So this leads us into what is Astro-Coaching. Heidi, I know you have a pretty extensive background in running and raising funds for nonprofits and women's initiatives and corporations, and you have that solid business and cultural background. Now with the astrology and all the physics and the astronomy and the literature and history and archetypes, that kind of provides a really, really unique view. So talk a little bit about what Astro-Coaching is and your approach and how someone can use it in their life.
Yeah. So, you know, I've always used astrologers' services. I still do. It's kind of like, you know, a barber has to get his hair cut by somebody too, right? So, you know, we go to astrologers and I've always enjoyed my sessions, but I noticed as a practitioner myself and as an astrologer working with clients, it was beginning to feel like these 1 to 1.5 hour natal chart readings and sessions were really dumping a lot of information on the client. And it's a bit overwhelming. And I know that even me as an astrologer, when I have my readings and take those away, I would forget most of what was said except maybe 1 or 2 points, because we can only hold so much information in a 1 hour call, right? So I started thinking, I want to have a more continuous relationship with my clients where we can work through transits that are hitting their chart, where they can learn astrology with me and become more comfortable reading their own natal chart, to where they have a deeper understanding and knowledge to feel confident, to look up things they need to look up, to understand how transits are hitting them, but then also to really use the natal chart almost like a Myers-Briggs test or a personality test, where we're learning their strengths, their talents, their weaknesses, their light, their shadow, and really starting to have a co-creation of change together while they're learning these concepts. So instead of just dumping information and running away, it's more like a co-creation together, and to build their confidence, not only in themselves, but in reading their natal chart and understanding it. So that was my whole motivation, is this needs to be deeper, this needs to be better, this needs to be easier for the client.
And one of the things I've noticed watching some of the videos you put out, which are fantastic, and that I really enjoy, is as the planet take time and have phases, if you will, or progressions, it could be maybe something that's coming up in the next 2 weeks to, hey, you're at a certain age and over the next 3 years, you can explain this. So that coaching you're doing is not just a reading and say, here's what you got today or this week. There are phases. So how does that tie in with what you're working with your clients for?
Well, it allows for more of a continuum of care in a way, you know, and it kind of gives a sense of stability. First of all, I'm with them, I'm telling them about them, they're starting to understand these transits. And then we're looking at, okay, not any transit is bad or good. They have their challenges, they have their blessings. And how can we work with that together? Let's think about what those are in your life right now. So it's easy for fear to take over when you hear, some people know enough to know that Saturn is a heavy planet or Pluto is about death and transformation. Then all of a sudden they're, you know, freaking out. And I've done it myself. Like, oh shit, Saturn's coming. But then realizing that it has its light, there's a reason you're going through these things. And so it's helping, you know, to work with the client to make that more approachable, less fear, more curiosity. Just that's what life coaching is, right? You know, approaching life with more curiosity.
Right.
Yeah.
I think one of the concepts that everyone can relate to, because you see it passed around the social media and in memes, right? Everyone, you know, Mercury retrograde. I know when I see it coming, for some reason, for some coincidence, every electronic device I ever own goes into full out revolt during Mercury retrograde. And it's pretty consistent. But, you know, the concept, and I think this is a good place to kind of dive in and show the light in the dark. So everyone's like, oh, Mercury retrograde, it means all communications off, don't talk to everyone, hunker down, your electronics won't work, just go live in a cave type of thing.
Right.
But sure, there's light and dark, and there's positive aspects in that as well.
Yeah. And hey, Josh, you have a lot of Gemini, and so Mercury is your ruling planet. So it makes sense when he's going funky that you might too, as you've got a lot of Mercury in Gemini. But yeah, no, that always gets me. It's a two-edged sword there. I'm like really grateful that people are starting to be aware that there's a Mercury retrograde, that there's even that awareness. Like 5-10 years ago, people were like, oh, whatever. So that's like all of like another planet is coming into awareness. Okay, now Mercury, people are pretty much that are watching astrology or reading it are starting to get familiar with Mercury. Now there's a lot of misinformation, but there's good information too. A lot of us were born during a Mercury retrograde. I mean, it's so common, 3 to 4 times a year, there's a lot of us in that population. And so sometimes your brain actually works better during a Mercury retrograde and you're more creative and you're thinking outside of the box. So there are definitely light parts to Mercury. I can't stand the tech glitches either. It does happen and it's funny. There are Mercury retrogrades that are worse for that than others. Some that doesn't affect much and it's maybe in verbal communication. It's maybe in relationships and some it's more technical. So yeah, there's a variance.
Like a coin, there's always two sides.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So we're here in unprecedented times. There's the COVID-19, which has caused uncertainty and fear in people's homes, in their personal lives, social isolation, jobs, security, everything has been shook up. So there are a lot of people that are reaching out for coaching of many styles and life coaching because it's really challenging people on their beliefs and their priorities. Give us an example or some information on how you work with clients and the services you provide.
Mm-hmm. So you hit the nail on the head. I mean, what people are really coming to me for now is clarity. And, they're facing a lot of in-between moments. The past is behind us and we're in the present and it's kind of foggy and cloudy. And there's this sense, people are sensing, I kind of have an opportunity for a new start. So they're trying to figure out who is this new me that's going to emerge after this crisis. That's what I think the light and the blessing is of COVID. We've all had this time to be quiet and to go in, and it can be very uncomfortable for some and very enlightening and maybe both. And so when they're coming to me, they're wanting clarity around what do I want to be after this, on the other side of this, whether it's in my marriage, in my career, spiritually, a million different things, how they approach life purpose. So with the coaching, it's very individualized. Those that want to just learn more about astrology will break those up into several sessions and work together until they feel confident just reading their own natal chart and transits. Or others really have one specific issue they want to gain clarity on. So we work together to try to get to the root of who they are, what they love, what brings them a feeling or sense of purpose in their life, and what's really true to their authentic identity. And we use the chart as kind of, like I mentioned before, almost like a personality test results. Okay, here's what we see. Here's where you're so strong. Like you have Venus in the 10th house. It's very important for you to love your career or you're going to feel unfulfilled. Some people who don't have heavy planets in the career house of the 10th house, it may not be that important. They could probably do almost any job and feel like, hey, I'm getting my money, I'm paying my bills, I'll do my fun stuff over here. But if that Venus influence is strong in the career sector, then they really need to be passionately connected to what they do for money. And so there's so much that we can see through these different placements for the person. And I get to present that to them and we talk about, is that true for you? How does
That's
that
what I was going to ask next. It sounds like almost that mirror, that reflection. Here's what's showing for you in the charts. How does that land, or what does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a direction or a forecast or a prediction. It's more of a, how would you term that?
Well, I love that you brought up prediction because that is what I really try to stay away from. I'm not a fortune teller. I'm not a psychic. I'm intuitive. I can sense, some change in energies with my clients. I think most astrologers have some layer of intuition, like we all do. But but it's really important not to get into the predictive state, because all a transit is like a weather report. You still get to decide whether you pull out an umbrella or wear a raincoat or get drenched. That's totally up to you.
I love that example. That's really the best example I've ever heard of astrology.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, well, I just want people to get out of this idea that astrology will provide the answers, or it will tell me if I should be with this guy or not, or it'll tell me whether, it does not do that. It gives you, like I said, the atmosphere, the weather, the energy. And then let's work together to build up your kind of alignment with your truth. Mm-hmm. Check the weather, see how that's looking, and let's flow into that and see how that will work out for you. But yes, when we do a natal chart reading, it's really a lot of asking questions. It should be that way. I feel strongly in my own personal practice to not say, okay, well, you have Mars in the ninth, so you are this. It's a conversation. Is that true for you? Do you like to travel? Is that part of your identity, that unless you're mobile, you're feeling stuck? And, so we talk about that. And I think that's the fun part for me and the client, to get to know each other and what makes the client tick, and their strengths. So.
And there's that balance between the forecast and what's coming up and what to be aware of in those reflections of what it is. Mm-hmm. And also the life coaching, which is a systematic approach to goal setting and mm-hmm. achieving them and accountability. So it's a beautiful balance. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of people out there doing that yet.
I've seen, I researched a little bit, and there are some starting to do that. I think we're going to see a lot more. I really do, because it's such a wonderful resource or tool to use in, like I said, presenting and letting the client reflect. It's a tool to use for that. And then we can create their plan around that chart and their personalities. And I think that's awesome. An awesome asset for a coach to have, mm-hmm. To have a starting point for the conversation even, and to progress it along. And then as you have your second, third, fourth, fifth coaching session, this depth comes in and this understanding, and then there's a flow in that relationship, and then they're more knowledgeable too. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's education, but it's co-creation. It's lovely. Yeah.
It is. Yeah. So I say so all the time with every first sentence.
I say so all the time too. I've been noticing that on my videos. I'm like, so.
Are there any themes, celestial themes or astrological themes coming up for us at this time that you can just share kind of at a high level for the next month, next couple months? Anything jumping out?
I don't know if I can stay at a high level in the 2020, Josh. It's all pretty deep. Okay. How I talked earlier about that people are now, you brought up the Mercury retrograde, like all of a sudden Mercury is getting popular. People are talking about Mercury. And this is the first time that people all really started talking about the Saturn-Pluto conjunction in January, because astrologers were kind of warning, not that they knew that it'd be a virus. Some did maybe, but not that I know of. But in 2019, we were starting to feel some energy come in, and astrologers knew that conjunction of Saturn and Pluto on January 12th was going to be a big one, and it was going to shift our society. And we knew that placement hadn't occurred for 500 years. So none of us had seen this in our lifetime. So when you have that heavy Capricorn energy, which I'll try not to get in too deep, let's try to stay up here. It was conjuncting. When you say conjunct, that means these planets were almost on top of each other or on top of each other, very, very close. So their energy is combining. And then you had Mercury and the sun there as well. So they were all these planets, four just right on top of each other, all in Capricorn. And when Mercury is there, that's a focus on the lungs. Mercury rules the lungs. So this stagnation, this heaviness in the lungs. It's just interesting, isn't it? To even have that connection there. But as that has moved on, you know, we've still have quite a bit in that heavier earth element, but now we're shifting more towards air. And so, but before we get there, I want to talk about that, you know, Saturn's relationship with Pluto. Saturn represents structure and building and kind of responsibility and maturity. And Pluto is about death and transformation and shedding the old and rebirthing the new. So you have these two planets talking. I want to build something. Well, I want to tear it down. You know, that's kind of what's happening. You're going to have to go through some shit if you want to build some new stuff. You know, you're going to have to make room for the new. So they're talking back and forth, and we're all under that energy, right? And so, like this year, Jupiter and Pluto are conjuncting. They just did April 4th. They're going to again in June and again in November. So we have until then where Jupiter is highlighting, Jupiter, the planet of expansion, is highlighting with the death planet of transformation. I'm going to expand the death element and transformation element is what Jupiter is saying to Pluto. Let's do that together a few times this year. So it's going to take us down that path of tearing down, dying, transformation, still in that Capricorn energy. But then come December, this is what you'll hear a lot of astrologers talking about. We have Jupiter going into Aquarius and Saturn going into Aquarius. It's literally the age of Aquarius. And this is going to start a 20-year focus on the air element. So Josh, you're going to be so happy here, right? Because you're an air sign. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying you won't have challenges and that air signs won't have real life still, but it's going to feel different. And this is when life will start going faster. There'll be faster developments in technology, and we're already seeing that starting. You know, things are going to start really going quicker. They're going to be lighter. They're going to be more focused on humanitarianism and social constructs and how we do society and humanitarianism. And it's going to shift from this fear-based kind of constrictive energy to more expand. I mean, that's the usual ebb and flow of the universe, right?
And you can definitely tell that interplay of the death and the rebirth, because it really is the death and the shifting we can see of the old ways to allow new space. And to take it at just even a high level, look at the companies that had to stop how they were doing something. Yes. They had to kill their in-office and move everyone remote. That was a death and rebirth, actually. You know? And you can see that on so many different levels, how businesses and individuals are rising to change the way they greet people and interact.
Yeah. And you know, the other thing is there's a lot of good that's come out of that, right? Like people either got to spend more time with their families, or they realized maybe sometimes they work better at home, or maybe they really like the office and they thought they hated it. There's been a lot of knowledge that's come around that piece. But what's interesting is even if it's good change, it's been major change, and that causes anxiety and a little fear. But then once we're ready to let go, then, and the Aquarius switch is going to happen with that. And it sounds far off, but just because that doesn't happen till December doesn't mean that energy isn't creeping in. Transits don't just hit and that's the minute they start. They flow into our consciousness and then they expand. And so we'll start feeling that by summer, fall, we're getting ready to switch, you know, into more releasing the old structures and looking forward. We're going to really be looking more forward thinking than kind of swimming in the anxiety and fear. Yeah.
And that's been one of my hopes through this, just on a larger perspective. It has caused us all to re-examine a lot of our own beliefs. So we're losing our old patterns. We are really making way for new thought patterns. You know? Like for me, the personal observation was I do a lot. I'm always active. And this forced shutdown has actually allowed me to settle in and breathe. And I was like, there's a lesson. I've got to slow down a bit.
Yes.
So I really hope that those out there in, you know, across the planet are finding good or finding lessons that they can move forward. One of the other thing that struck me as you were talking was kind of a sense of calm or ease talking about the shifts would bring to someone to say, hey, if you know this is coming up, or you may be struggling with these items or issues for the next 3 months, seems to be a way to almost bring in a sense of calm, saying, I know that it's coming, and I can prepare for it. So awareness on the one side and practicality and implementation on the other.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up, because that is why I love astrology. You know, and I don't read mine every morning to try to dictate my day. I actually try to wait till night and then reflect. Was that correct? Is that true? You know, but then I'll look ahead, you know, and see, you know, what's coming up. And I think I've talked to you about this before, but, you know, during midlife, like from 36 to 45, there's 5 or 6 major transits that everyone goes through. And we can predict exactly the changes that are going to occur around those times. So that gives such insight and comfort to people who feel like they're losing their minds. They're losing their identity. They don't, maybe they're divorce, death, loss of income, whatever it is. It's really just an impetus for change. And that transit almost tells them this is what you need to be looking at, because you can look at where it's hitting in their chart. So that kind of knowledge, you're right, is such a comfort. Okay, I'm not alone. The whole world goes through this, just in different ways. I'm going to make it through. And we can look at how you can use that energy, right? Instead of just feel like you're going crazy or ungrounded. Yeah.
Well, Heidi, this has been delightful. I am really excited to watch and see your business grow. Just wrapping things up here, is there anything you'd like to share with the audience? Is anything coming up, or anything that you're doing personally with Zing Astrology in the near future?
Well, I've really enjoyed over the last few weeks doing some free Zoom calls just so we can get together as a community and learn more together. So those are going to continue over several different subjects, but like the one you attended, some basic astrology, just to get comfortable looking at the natal chart, but then also really diving into some deeper things like the wounded healer Chiron, or, you know, what is your love and sex style with your Venus and Mars placements? Those are really fun. You know, they're juicy and you get to find out an element about yourself. So we'll do more Zoom calls, and I hope to offer more educational videos and programs like that. But also, of course, the basic natal chart reading is always going to be available. I do a North Node or life purpose reading, which is popular too. And then, of course, the individualized coaching packages, which the client and myself can build together according to what they need.
That's wonderful. I'll leave all of your information and contact information in the description and the links below. One thing out there is you have a great newsletter. So if people do go to zingastrology.com, that's Z-I-N-G, astrology.com, you can sign up for your newsletter. And I always enjoy that when it comes into the inbox. So,
Josh.
Heidi, it's been a great afternoon. I wish you the best, and keep us posted what's coming up in the world.
I will. Thanks so much, Josh. It was fun. Take care of yourself.
Thank you for watching. If you liked what you saw, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button right now. Stay tuned and check out the channel for other interesting and informative videos.